in giving away the control, you got it. You got the kind of control you wanted. That's to say, where you had a loving relationship to the world, but you didn't have to make up your mind what it should do. You let it decide. Now, do you see that's how your bodies work? You don't have to make up your mind what your nerve cells are going to do. You've delegated all that authority. If the President of the United States has to lay awake at nights thinking what every official under his command is going to do, he can't be president. He's got to make an act of trust in all those subordinates to be responsible and carry on their things in just the same way as you make an act of trust to all your subordinate organs to carry on their functions without you having to tell them what to do. And this is the secret of what we will call organic power as distinct from political power. Lao Tzu puts it in this way: the great Tao flows everywhere, both to the left and to the right. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. And when merits are accomplished, it lays no claim to them. The more, therefore, you relinquish power, trust others, the more powerful you become. But in such a way that instead of having to lie awake nights controlling everything, you do it beautifully by trusting the job to everyone else. And they carry it on for you. So you can go to sleep at night and trust your nervous system to wake you up in the morning. You can even tell it, I want to wake up at 6 o'clock, and it'll wake you up just like an alarm clock. This seems a sort of paradox to say this, but the principle of unity, of coming to a sense of oneness with the whole of the rest of the universe, is not to try to obtain power over the rest of the universe. That will only disturb it and antagonize it and make it seem less one with you than ever. The way to become one with the universe is to trust it as another, as you would another, and say, let's see what you're going to do.
Hi, welcome to Peace Propaganda, a weekly show about living peacefully and the people who try to prevent it. This is Adam.
This is Becky.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about coming to anarchism from the left. We had a request from a Redditor by the name of Slyer, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
And I do want to remind you that you can always follow us on Reddit. I'm Mises 2 Pieces.
And I am Beck 11, as in 1-1.
Yeah, Beck 1-1. Yeah, so definitely look for us there. I'd love to have a conversation with you. So anyways, Slyer came to us and after we posted one of the previous shows, and he wanted us to talk a little bit more about coming to anarchism from the left, which I think is a great topic, and I think it's really a blind spot for a lot of anarchist, libertarian types, because I think I'm on firm footing when I say that most of them do come from the right.
Yeah, I think it tends to be more common. And I think it's a really interesting topic to explore. So one of the thoughts that I was having was that the sort of key, I think the key aspect to sort of latch onto from the left as an anarchist is that a lot of people on the left sort of really emphasize this idea of an egalitarian sentiment. Like basically they want everyone to be treated equally, which is, I mean, obviously totally valid, but it's really the emphasis for them, I feel like.
Yeah, it's a lot about equal footing is kind of how they'll say it, or equal opportunity is even how it's been codified in law. And I certainly empathize with that. again, listeners will know that both Becky and myself came from the left to anarchism, and so I know what they're talking about when they say, well, poor people just sort of can't compete in the market against rich entrenched powers, which is true, which anarchists generally will agree to. That is a problem,
right? And so people, particularly on the left, want to feel more like we are all, like they have this basic understanding that humans are all in this together. We're all in this together, and it shouldn't be, you versus me or us versus them. It should be, we're all one.
Right.
And I think something that's really important for people on the left to understand about the free market, the market economy, is that it is the very thing that tells us, that lets us know that we are one, that we are in this together, and that we can't do it by ourselves. Yeah. Because the reality is that for me, I live, I couldn't survive without the market every single day of my life. And I think except for some very few exceptions, that's the case for everyone.
Right. I mean, unless you're stacking up on bullets and seeds and you have 10 acres out in Oklahoma, chances are you rely on the market. And so, and we were talking earlier about how, free market and a handful of other phrases are sort of dog whistle terms, especially for people on the left, because it's sort of this nebulous thing that gets thrown out there by Republican types like, oh, the free market will save us all. And then they turn around and they, hand things over to their crony capitalist buddies on Wall Street or in local government, or, this revolving door of power.
Right. And I think the other thing that gives the free market, the phrase, the free market, a bad rap is that, a lot of times I think people on the left assume that we're saying, oh, the free market will solve everything. It's the solution to everything, like you said. But that's not exactly what we're saying. We're not saying that the free market is the solution. We're saying that the free market is the only appropriate way to find the solutions.
It's a process, not an evolutionary.
Yeah, it's an evolutionary thing.
Yeah, and I would really encourage either listeners who may be on the left and not anarchists, or just people who find themselves talking to people on the left a lot, either, don't be afraid to say what you mean, of course, but just know that when you say things like capitalism, when you say things like free market, when you say things like taxation is theft,
comes with baggage.
Yeah, it comes with a lot of baggage. So, it's really important. That's a messaging thing. And, I get that, especially if you come from the right, there is a sentimentality of being PC, is not good. And I agree, it's not good. But on the other end, if you're too blunt, you're also not getting your message across.
Right, you're isolating people who feel like PC is necessary or appropriate.
Or it's almost apart from that. It's just an issue of being able to communicate clearly. And if you start on a line of thought where the other person is just having emotional reaction after emotional reaction, there's not going to be a clear line of communication at all.
You're right.
And I would actually suggest there are some I don't know if they don't really call themselves, anarcho-capitalists or libertarians, but they're sort of co-travelers on this free market ideology. Folks like Kevin Carson at the Center for a Stateless Society. I wouldn't totally hitch my wagon to everything that he says, but he has some real good things to say. He wrote a book called Markets Not Capitalism, and which I know is heresy to many in the audience. Markets Not Capitalism sounds like a contradiction, but this is an open appeal to people on the left, people who understand capitalism as meaning something very different than a free market, for example.
Right. And one last thing that I want to point out here is that the free market is really just free people interacting voluntarily, and that's all it is.
Yes, thank you.
So when we say that the government is aggressing against the free market, what we're really saying is that the government is aggressing against free people interacting voluntarily.
Right. And so the theme of this show going forward is actually going to be about not so much how the government stops you from doing something, but what happens when people are free to go about, as Becky was just saying, to go about doing things in their own best interest.
Right. So it's sort of about it's about what happens when the government or some other authority lets go of their control over this situation.
Exactly. So, and I think giving examples when you're talking to people about these subjects really help. I mean, it's easy to fall into like whack-a-mole, like, what about the road? Who will build the roads? Who will build the schools? Stuff like that, which actually is exactly what today's show is about. And you have to be careful because sometimes it's just an impossibly high barrier to trip you up, and suddenly you have to be an expert on every aspect of society. But at the same time, it's good to be able to show, like, well, look at these positive outcomes from letting go. Right. Okay. So we're gonna take a quick break here, and then when we get back, we're gonna talk about the roads. Who will build the roads, and how will they be built more accurately?
Everyday people like you and me just wanna live naturally. Time taught you, and you told me, nothing gonna get us down. Can't you see? I said, if it don't matter.
I want to take this opportunity to tell you about Sean's Outpost, a homeless outreach program which has provided over 20,000 meals to the homeless in Northwest Florida. They're also funded entirely through Bitcoin donations. They are proving that we can address the problems in our community without the state, without its predatory welfare programs, and without its Ponzi money. Recently, Sean's Outpost launched its newest, boldest initiative, Satoshi Forest, a 9-acre homeless sanctuary where they are teaching permaculture, aquaponics, and self-sufficiency to the homeless residents. No one sticks a gun in anyone's face and makes them donate to Sean's Outpost, and yet, every day, people do. Please consider donating to this inspiring cause. Visit seansoutpost.com. That's SEANS outpost.com.
All right, so we're going to talk about the roads for a little while here, and specifically not how we can do the roads without government, although I think I could speak for both of us that it's certainly possible. But here we're talking just about relaxing control. There's a town in the UK, was it Poynton, right?
Yep.
Yeah, this town had a serious traffic congestion problem, and it
was bad enough that it was actually affecting commerce in the town, and the councilor of the town was wanting to fix the town basically because it was economically failing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was just nobody wanted to walk around in town because you just couldn't really get anywhere. There was nowhere to park, et cetera, et cetera. And so the conclusion that they sort of came to was that it was not because there weren't enough rules helping people, but because there were too many rules, and it was totally, crushing the way that people were getting around.
And it was actually they arrived at that conclusion in an interesting way. It was almost like they had tried everything. They had tried controlling it in all of the ways that they could think of, the traffic flow at this intersection. But they just, no matter what they tried, things, didn't get better. They changed mildly, maybe, but they didn't improve the situation.
Right.
And so it wasn't until they said, you know what, we give up. What are we supposed to do? And they just loosened everything. And they said, you know what, let's, let go.
So they sort of embraced this philosophy known as shared space, which is they sort of reformatted the whole road system in their town to be not just for cars, but for pedestrians, for bikes, and and for any form of travel. And so if you see it, and we'll have the links in the show notes for you for the video. But if you see it, you can see that there's no curb, there's no, and there's obviously there are no lights at all. There are no stoplights. They ripped out all the stoplights, was really the biggest thing. And everybody sort of assumed that, okay, well, if you take out the stoplights, then everyone's just going to be crashing into one another, and it's just going to be chaos, and cats living with dogs, and
right. There's this like idea that if you impose one person's idea, one person's brain power over the whole situation, applied one time,
right.
Via rules, that is somehow more effective than having every individual who arrives at the intersection use their own brain power to
right.
solve the problem at hand currently.
Right. They rejected the philosophy of it doesn't matter how bad the rules are as long as everybody's following the same rules, because in fact it does matter how bad the rules are, and if everyone's following their own rule, which is kind of the same rule, because that rule being, I don't want to get into a car accident and die.
I don't want to die.
Yeah.
Yep.
You see, we're gonna play some clips from a video. We did like a bit of a mashup here of what we thought were relevant clips, but the video is about 15 minutes in length, and I really encourage you to check it out because it's very inspiring. And when you do, you'll see that before they did the renovations, it was just a typical intersection, which is to say when the light was red, everybody stopped, and when the light was green, they just blew through mindlessly. And after the renovations, everybody approaches the intersection with caution. And
I love watching the clip of the after, the resulting traffic flow, because it just emanates peace. You look at it and you're like, God, it's so peaceful at this very heavily trafficked intersection.
Right.
And everybody's just slowly approaching and thinking about what they're doing because their life is on the line, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give the wrong impression. I don't think people are like terrified to enter the intersection.
Of course not.
It seems very.
But people are treating driving like the responsibility that it is,
right.
for once.
Right. They're not off-putting that onto the civil engineers.
Traffic lights that are right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so why don't we? It's just about a 2-minute montage of we didn't cherry pick it or by any means. Please check out the full video. It's very inspiring. But we got about 2 minutes of audio here for you that the people in the town sort of describe their experience with letting go.
Over the years, the increase in traffic and the steps taken to try to deal with that have changed this place from being the heart of the village into being merely a traffic signal controlled wasteland.
We looked at pedestrianisation, we looked at opening up side roads, and everything we looked at didn't actually do anything for Poynton. It just moved traffic faster.
There's a misconception that if you take away the lights, people are going to drive fast. Actually, the opposite is true. It's the green light that encourages the speed, that licenses the aggression. If you take away the light and there's uncertainty at the junction, people naturally approach slowly and filter.
That's
just as we do.
That is absolutely right, isn't it? People sit there at a traffic light, revving the engine, waiting to get away, and if they come up to a junction where there's no light, they do go slowly.
Begins. Shared space is a term which simply describes a shift in thinking away from the regulated highway towards using the natural skills that humans are blessed with to negotiate movements and to allow the normal civilities of life to continue. Shared space is not new. It's the way streets have always been since we've had cities, since we've had streets. It's only in the last 50 or 60 years that we've believed it's important to segregate traffic from other aspects of life.
A new hierarchy emerges with vulnerable road users at the top. Pedestrians in the shared space scenario, when there are no lights to dictate behaviour, are seen as fellow road users rather than obstacles in the way of the next light.
Most people crossing the road will wave. That goes on and feeds other small gestures of kindness and consideration.
With Fountain Place, the numbers of accidents are incredibly reduced, whereas prior to the scheme with traffic lights, we had quite a few serious incidents involving pedestrians, whereas now we haven't had one.
It has a very calming effect, and I think we're all being kinder to each other, motorists and pedestrians alike.
I think this is such an exciting development that there are towns in the UK that are actually doing this experiment, that are removing all the rules and saying, let's see what happens. They're putting enough trust in people that they want what's best for everyone, really, that they're able to just see what happens.
Right, exactly. And I really liked what he said there about the green light licenses aggression.
Absolutely. It's fascinating you can just watch people at a green light, waiting to go, right? And they figure that gives them the license to, just go straight ahead because somebody told me the authority, that green light is the authority, and it said it's my turn.
Right. And how many times is somebody, going across on a bike or something, admittedly against, quote, the rules, and it just ends disastrously because, if one person isn't paying attention, if nobody's paying attention, really, and then somebody breaks the rules, it's a disaster.
Right.
Whereas if everyone's paying attention and one guy's, maybe just too aggressive, it can be accounted for. It can be handled in a very organic way.
And the best way to ensure that everybody is paying attention is to make sure that they know that it's up to them. Yeah. I mean, this is, there aren't any rules that they can fall back on and say, well, the light was green, so it was my right to go. No.
Right.
There was someone in front of you.
Yeah. How about just don't hit people?
Yeah.
But I guess that's a common theme. Don't hit people.
Right.
Well, so I think that's just a wonderful example, and that's just one of many that we as anarchists, or libertarians can point to, if ever we're in a discussion, particularly about the roads, but in anything, it's oftentimes it's the counterintuitive idea which ends up working better. It's not about telling people what to do. It's about giving them the freedom to do what they already know is best. And I think one of them said it perfectly in that montage there, which was unlocking the creative humanity or something along those lines.
Yeah, the human capacity, something like that.
Exactly.
To make your own decisions and ensure your own safety.
Right, and that is nothing to do specifically with roads. I mean, that's just a universally applicable statement right there.
Yeah, and I really like what you said about how the right answers aren't always the intuitive ones. Mm-hmm. I think we have a tendency as humans to assign a solution to a problem and then not observe the results objectively and just assume that they work, because how would it not work to just, if you tell somebody to do something, then you problem solved.
Yeah, and thinking that somebody out there is going to solve the problem for you. And it's just like gun ownership and police. When seconds matter, the police are only minutes away. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So just trusting people to take that responsibility for themselves, which is not the same as foisting the responsibility on others, right? Of course.
Right. It's taking responsibility for your own life and your own actions.
Right. If you want to drive through town,
which is your choice. Yeah. Right. You have to be willing to accept the consequences of not doing that carefully enough.
Right. Exactly. So, hey, yeah, I love that. So I think we got the music coming up here. I think we're going to come back, and you brought in something as well.
We've got another exciting experiment in loosening the rules, but related to children this time.
Yeah, as children and schools. So we're hitting it all. We're hitting children. We're hitting children.
We're hitting.
Okay. No, but we're going to talk about schools, roads, children, all that. So, okay, we'll be right back.
I'm just a natural born traveling man, doing what I think I should, doing what I think I should. And I don't give a damn about a greenback dollar, spend it fast as I can.
Hi, this is Adam, host of Peace Propaganda. I know that starting something new is hard, really hard, but it's important to get our message heard. That's why I want to help you promote your liberty-related project. I'm offering free 45-second time spots on Peace Propaganda. That's right, free. So do you have something that you're trying to promote? Contact me, Adam Elpo, at host.peacepropaganda@gmail.com. That's host.peacepropaganda@gmail.com. You can send me your own sound clip and I'll play it, or you can send me a blurb about your project and I'll read what you wrote. Or I can talk about it in my own words. I look forward to hearing from you. Now, back to the show.
Lately, I've been losing sleep, dreaming about the things that we could be. But baby, I've been praying hard. Said no more counting dollars, we'll be counting stars. Yeah, we'll be counting stars.
So we found a story about a school in the UK that is actually going back to the olden days in terms of playtime for kids, and they're allowing kids to play in a much more natural way that's much more rough house like, but no, yeah.
Yeah, and they're basically allowing them to experience being a child. Some people, you'll hear it in the clip because we put together about a 2-minute montage clip for you, and some of the people who witnessed it, they objected and they said, oh, the kids are going to get hurt, and you'll hear from the kids that in fact they do get hurt.
and you know what? Like, it's not a big deal because they're kids.
Right.
Kids get hurt all the time.
Exactly.
Doing, random stupid kid stuff.
Right, and so they're allowing them to sort of be children and learn, and they're learning how to interact with their peers. They're learning how to handle failure, and how to handle success, in a much more visceral way than being graded or something like that.
Right, and they're learning something more than follow the rules that an authority figure laid out for you.
Yeah, and that, you just cannot overstate that enough. So, okay, yeah, like I said, it's about a 2-minute clip. Really, really cool stuff. The full video is in the show notes. I really encourage you to check that out. As I encourage you to always go to the show notes, where you will find, how to follow us on Twitter and SoundCloud and all of that. So, okay, and Facebook. Yes, Becky is relaunching the Facebook. Please go on there. You will be able to interact with her directly. It's a great time. We're having a good time there. Anyways, we're going to play a 2-minute clip here about the schools, and we'll be right back.
Over the last year, their confidence has really improved. They'll stand up, they'll swing, they'll tumble off and fall on each other. Oh, we've had the odd accident, but nothing serious.
Like a lot of good things, it all started in the playground.
But it's become so much more than that. It's just continually looking at our play and saying, how can we just keep expanding it for our children? It's all about taking risk, and this is controlled risk, and it's considered risk, and it's just that wonderful unstructured play that keeps them really busy. We haven't just said that there's no rules. We stand back and we watch, and then we actually meet with the children and we co-construct the rules. And then the children have ownership of the rules and they work extremely well.
War games and bull rush, it's not very PC, is it?
Oh, no, it's not, and I think that's what's so good about it. These are children's games. These are traditional children's games that you and I played, and I really don't know why they've gone out of fashion.
One of the things that happens, because adults care, is that they become a bit too involved in children's play. Adults are best to go inside and sit down with a glass of wine and let the kids play.
And the girls are putting their hand up too.
We're tough out west.
No. And those girls more than hold their own. Do you ever worry about getting hurt?
No.
Have you ever been hurt?
Guys, you're supposed to be playing bull rush. Yeah, actually, really, I have really been hurt.
And what happened then?
I didn't care. I got up and dealt with it.
I think we're wrapping kids up in cotton wool a bit too much. Years ago, a good parent was somebody who just let kids play. Nowadays, a good parent might be considered to be somebody who takes them to dancing lessons and rugby practice.
There will be some people, some parents who think, I don't want my children, especially my little girls, playing bull rush. What do you say to those people?
Well, if you think you can't handle it, well, then don't play.
For these educationalists, the risks involved in a bit of rough and tumble are far less than the risks associated with inactivity.
If you get a kid to test himself when he's 7 years old on a scooter or a tree, climbing a tree, then he's not going to have to test himself when he's 17 behind the wheel of a car.
hand, they also say it makes it for better students.
The only time children get into trouble is when they're bored, when they really don't get a chance to be.
How true.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of risk taking and developing risk sort of awareness and tolerance as a child is so important. I think, I mean, honestly, personally, I count my lucky stars every day that my parents put me in gymnastics as a young child, because without it, I would probably not have learned so well to take calculated risks, and I would be a very different person today.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And, I think whenever anyone talks about like how to raise kids, I feel like there's this immediate like emotional reaction like, oh, if you don't do it this way, then you must mean doing it this other crazy way. And how this applies here is like, oh, so if you want kids to be taking risks, what you're talking about is, making all the girls play football and, or something like that. And it's like, that's, it's not what we're talking about on any level. But that's the knee-jerk reaction,
Right. And this idea that you can't just let kids sort of explore their own boundaries
and decide for themselves.
Right. I mean, that's what they're doing, right? When they're testing those boundaries, they're saying what risks end badly and which ones don't, right?
Exactly. And I really love what one of the gals in the video said. If you don't think you can handle it, then don't play.
Right.
I mean, how much more dead obvious simple can it be?
Yeah, this whole thing where we sort of legislate to the lowest common denominator to make sure nobody gets hurt,
right,
is a very dangerous thing, because it really does lower all of society or all of the playground or whatever you're legislating down to that lowest common denominator.
Right, and that's why this is just such a great example of letting go and just really producing overwhelming positive effects in ways that you wouldn't even think of at first. Like the one administrator in the school said, if the kids learn that taking risks end poorly when they're 7, then they won't take stupid risks when they're 17 behind the wheel of a car. And that's just, I mean, I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah,
and that's kind of the point, right? Is that nobody can think of all the different ways that allowing people the freedom will help them in the long run. It's just, you can't possibly know. And that's the whole point. That's the whole argument against centralization. And moreover, that's the whole argument for freedom.
Right. And it does take it's scary. It's scary to just let go of control, because it feels like if you let go of control, everything's just going to go to hell in a handbasket. But the reality is that, unless we trust it, unless we trust humans' capacity to handle their own problems as they arise, we're never going to be free, first of all. And we're also never going to learn our own capacity, I think.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I couldn't have said it better. Okay, well, that's it for today's show. We're almost ending early in that we're only several minutes over. But yeah, I want to remind you, everything that we talked about today is in the show notes. All the songs, all the clips that we played, some good stuff in there. And of course, you can follow us on iTunes. Just search for Peace Propaganda. Same thing on SoundCloud and Stitcher. You can find us on Twitter at Peace Podcast, on Facebook at Peace Propaganda, and of course there's the Bitcoin tip jar. And I want you to know that we really put a lot of effort into these podcasts. We really struggle a lot with the technology. Not to put too fine a point on it, but these things don't make themselves, and every little bit helps. Really, I mean, every dime towards better equipment makes the podcast that much easier to produce, and it really takes the burden off of us struggling against the technology, so that we can focus on making the best show possible.
We have to eat too. So.
Yes, and that as well. And as you heard, we're both jobless, or at least I'll be jobless soon. So yeah, okay, there it is. Thank you so much for tuning in again. Today was Saturday, February 1st, 2014.
Have a great week.
With them 9 inch